It's unfortunate that the Russians chose to violate the INF Treaty. Two parties, one party bails out. We ultimately decided it wasn't worth the risk, frankly, the risk the previous administration had taken in staying in a treaty with two parties and only one actively complying.
The Pentagon says the U.S. will begin testing a new intermediate-range missile from ground-based launchers in the coming weeks, likely based on the Tomahawk cruise missile currently deployed aboard warships and submarines, used most recently to strike Syria in 2017 and the following year as well. In Thailand, 6 bomb blasts wounded at least 4 people while Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in town. Liz?
Thank you, Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon. Reports coming in that the U.S. plans a test flight of a new missile that would have been prohibited under the 32-year-old Nuclear Arms Control Treaty. Let's get to Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He's Peter Brookes. Peter, a lot of finger-pointing here. Where do you come down on this?
Well, the Russians are wrong. They've been violating this treaty, Liz, for 5, maybe 6 years. The Obama administration picked it up. They waited to call them out publicly on it. They've been negotiating with them since then, trying to get the Russians back into the treaty. But the Secretary of State's right. You can't have a contract if one of the parties isn't complying. And the Russians have not only tested this missile, but they've also deployed several of them. And they may deploy more. The Russians are saying, we haven't deployed anything yet, but we will.
Where do they deploy them?
They're deployed in Russia. Okay. They're not deployed overseas, but they're deployed in Russia, and they threaten all of Europe. So the Russians, they come out and saying, well, if we deploy this, but they have deployed it. There's several battalions that are already deployed. So the Russians are in non-compliance with the treaty.
All right, we still have the larger New START treaty still in place for 2 years, which imposes limits on the number of long-range nuclear warheads. I want to get to this story. Your reaction to President Trump on North Korea doing 3 weapons tests over the past week. The president tweeted Kim Jong-un, quote, do the right thing because he's far too smart not to. He does not want to disappoint his friend, President Trump. All right, can we really expect this from the leader of a rogue nation that tortures and kills its own citizens? Does President Trump need to be more aggressive with him?
Well, look, the North Koreans are involved in developing leverage. There was a possibility that Secretary Pompeo or our senior envoy for North Korea was going to meet with the North Koreans in Thailand, in Bangkok. The North Koreans decided not to show. But the fact is that, as the president has mentioned, we're trying to start talks with them. So these tests, what has been 3 in the last week or so, are meant to create leverage against the United States at the negotiating table if we ever get back to it. So I don't think we need to overreact to this. Of course, it is a violation of UN sanctions against North Korea. But this is how North Korea plays. They play hardball, and this is part of their hardball strategy to develop leverage against the United States in any future negotiations.
Okay, let's get to Hong Kong, because we have pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. 2 straight months of this. Hong Kong government workers for the first time joining. Chinese military threatening action. Are you worried, as other officials are worried, about a possible Tiananmen Square type problem here?
We should be concerned, obviously. We don't want to see something like that. We don't want to see violence. We want to see civil protests be allowed to take place. But the people of Hong Kong, Liz, are concerned about the erosion of their limited liberties. They have limited liberties. It is not a full democracy in Hong Kong, and things are not moving in the right direction in terms of their desires to have a full democracy. But China has a lot of equities here. Obviously, Hong Kong is incredibly important economically. It's also, China is worried about something like an incident happening, as you mentioned, and what effect that might have on a bigger prize for China, and that's Taiwan. Remember, China believes that Taiwan is part of China, and it wants Taiwan to unify with it. And the democracy in Taiwan and the people of Taiwan, if they see what's going on in Hong Kong and it's met with violence, that would certainly hurt public opinion there.
Peter Brookes, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
To the backlash.